o de lo que han elegido hacer. Y ese síndrome que se describió primero en enfermeras jefes de unidades de cuidados intensivos en Inglaterra, ¿sí? Esa descripción inicial que hicieron ellas con unas psicólogas clínicas, rápidamente, digamos, cogió vuelo internacional y se conoció en todas partes, en el mundo occidental por lo menos, y el burnout pues, apareció. Yo creo que siempre hubo burnout, pero se tipificó y se aisló, digamos, hace unos 30 años más o menos. ¿Sí? Luego de eso, sí, cada vez más surgieron también desde la descripción primera una escala para medir el burnout, ¿no? Con una serie de preguntas que le permitían a los investigadores, a las personas interesadas, pues identificar quién tenía burnout. Ahora se llama trastorno por desgaste laboral, está incluido en el DSM-5, en el CI-11, es un diagnóstico más, ¿sí? Lo que no sé si es bueno o malo, porque pues si lo psicopatologizamos, hacemos también que la gente no busque ayuda, porque nadie quiere ir donde el psiquiatra, como bien sabemos, ¿sí? Ni nosotros mismos, para empezar. El trastorno por desgaste laboral aparece en diversas profesiones. Aunque se describió primero en el área de salud, también se ha descrito burnout en otras profesiones. Profesores de niños especiales, ¿no? Guardianes de prisión, ¿sí? O sea, gente que trabaja en medio de un estrés elevado. La noción de estrés es inseparable de la noción de desgaste laboral. O sea, mientras más estresado uno esté, entendiendo que el estrés se refiere a la presión que viene de fuera. Y esa noción es esencial para la comprensión del burnout. Es una condición externa que, tal como lo deja saber la expresión inglesa, significa que te desgastas por fricción. O sea, hay un factor externo, como cuando uno frota un pedazo de madera contra una superficie áspera, ¿no? Eso se desgasta, se calienta, incluso se quema, se alcanza a chamuscar, ¿no es cierto?, por la fricción. O sea, es una cosa externa, en principio. Esa situación externa termina por agotarte ese agotamiento se traduce en unos síntomas que inicialmente y ahora continúan siendo los mismos, ¿sí? Ausentismo laboral, pérdida de la motivación y del interés por el trabajo previamente escogido, ¿sí? Problemas de sueño, insomnio, despertares nocturnos múltiples, despertarte en madrugada con ansiedad, que es un síntoma de la neurosis de angustia, como la llamábamos antes, ¿no? Y luego la aparición de una actitud cínica y desdeñosa frente al trabajo, frente a la institución en que se trabaja. Esto no sirve para nada, yo no sirvo para nada, todo lo que se hace es inútil, esto no tiene fin, esto siempre ha sido así, ¿no? Y esto es una desgracia, ¿sí? Además, aparecen síntomas físicos, ¿sí? Cansancio, dolor lumbar, cefalea tensional, característica occipital, ¿no? Quejas funcionales variadas, ¿no? que son a veces tratadas inútilmente o autotratadas en el caso de los médicos, lo que empeora aún más las cosas, ¿no? Irritación gástrica, reflujo, molestias varias, comen en exceso, ¿no? Y ahí vamos entrando entonces en un capítulo que a mí me parece importante, que es la aparición de conductas autodestructivas. ¿A qué podemos llamar conductas autodestructivas? Son conductas autodestructivas, por ejemplo, beber en exceso, fumar, ¿sí? Trabajar en exceso puede ser una conducta autodestructiva, ¿sí? Funcionar de una manera despótica y agresiva con la gente que trabaja con uno, ¿sí? Es una conducta finalmente autodestructiva, ¿sí? Una autoexigencia desmesurada, cosa que hacen muchos colegas, es también una conducta autodestructiva. Lo primero que se dice como causa del desgaste laboral es una carga laboral excesiva. Yo quiero detenerme un poco en ese primer concepto. Una carga laboral excesiva es ¿cuál? ¿En dónde? ¿Para quién? O sea, todos los que tienen una carga, o cuándo considero yo que mi carga laboral es excesiva. Esa es una cosa notablemente subjetiva, como se imaginarán. Hay gente que trabaja desde las 5 de la mañana hasta las 11 de la noche, día tras día, mes tras mes, año tras año, incansablemente, ¿no? Y no le pasa nada, y no tiene burnout. Entonces, ahí tenemos que preguntarnos, más que ¿por qué tienen tantos un desgaste laboral? Deberíamos preguntarnos por qué otros no lo tienen. ¿Cuáles son los factores protectores de mucha gente que conocemos, que trabajó y trabaja toda su vida, ¿no? y sigue ahí y no está cansado y está contento, ¿no? ¿Qué tienen esos que los que hacen desgaste laboral no tienen? Esa es la pregunta. Y es la pregunta que voy a intentar contestar en los siguientes minutos. ¿Sí? Empezaría hablando de algo que se consideró un factor protector desde el comienzo de la descripción del burnout, que es el problema de la vocación. ¿Sí? O sea, cuando uno hace algo que le gusta y a uno le gusta lo que hace, ¿sí? Ese podría ser el primer factor protector. O sea, a uno le gusta ser médico. Quiere ser médico, quiso ser médico desde chiquito y logró ser médico. Y después decidió uno que quiere ser patólogo, o que quiere ser internista, o que quiere ser cirujano, o que quiere ser psiquiatra, como el caso de nosotros, ¿sí? Y uno se vuelve especialista en eso y se supone, es la suposición, o es una suposición optimista, claro, ¿sí? Como muchas de las suposiciones. Suponemos que ese sujeto que ha logrado por fin conseguir la especialidad que anhelaba, cosa que ahora es mucho más difícil que antes, ¿sí? Va a estar feliz, va a estar contento, va a estar realizado, por fin soy lo que quería ser. Si eso es así, En términos psicoanalíticos, ¿de qué estoy hablando? Estoy hablando de sublimación. O sea, si usted está sublimando en el término tal como fue acuñado por Freud, ¿sí? O sea, está convirtiendo una pulsión interna no consciente en algo que la satisface, ¿no? Y que además es objeto de reconocimiento externo y que produce una satisfacción personal, pues ese es el primer factor protector, una real vocación. ¿Qué pasa en la vida real? Nuestra, por lo menos. Yo observo, después de más de 50 años de estar haciendo este oficio, ¿sí? Que me refiero al oficio no solo con el oficio de psiquiatra o de psicoterapeuta, psicoanalista, sino al oficio de profesor. ¿Qué se observa? Que cada vez hay más gente en todo el país que, como la única vía de mejorar personalmente, de mejorar la vida de los suyos, es la profesionalización universitaria, buscan profesionalizarse como único modo de salir de condiciones de pobreza y de limitación social y de toda índole. Entonces, hazte médico, le dice la mamá, ¿sí? Tecnóloga al hijito, ¿sí? Hazte médico, porque eso, los médicos siempre ganan mucha plata, los médicos siempre tienen trabajo, los médicos son maravillosos, hazte médico, mijo. Ya, listo. Entonces, me hago médico. Satisfago el sueño de mis padres, el sueño de mi barrio, el sueño de la comunidad que me rodea. Pero eso no era estrictamente hablando lo que yo quería. Me hago eso, me profesionalizo, porque eso es lo que toca hacer para poder sobresalir o ascender socialmente. De entrada yo creo que hay un defecto. ¿Sí? ¿Por qué? Porque esa exigencia externa se convertirá en autoexigencia. Y una de las cosas que tienen los pacientes que tienen desgaste laboral es que muchos de ellos exhiben una autoexigencia desmesurada y que los agota y los destruye, porque nunca están contentos con lo que hacen. ¿Sí? Parecería, y eso lo obliga a uno a sospechar que la motivación real, o sea, en términos sublimatorios, no estaba ahí. Y a veces algunos pacientes, yo he visto muchos con eso, ¿no? Tal vez por efecto de mi edad, ¿qué me pasa ahora? Ahora quiero decir desde hace unos 15 años o 20 años, que cada vez más veo médicos. El 80% de mi clientela son médicos, en psicoterapia, en psicoanálisis. ¿Sí? Y alguno me decía hace unos años, ¿sabe qué? Yo hubiera querido ser veterinario. A mí me encantan los animales, a mí me encanta curar animales, a mí me encanta ayudar a los animales. Los animales son maravillosos. Por contraste con los seres humanos que son una porquería, ¿sí? A uno nada le da más satisfacción que curar un gato o curar un perro, porque esos sí son buenos. O sea, no hay maldad en ningún gato, ni hay maldad en ningún perro. No hay maldad, a menos que un desgraciado dueño lo vuelva malo. Pero no son malos, nunca. En cambio, los seres humanos son una porquería. O sea, listo. Y entonces, ¿y por qué no entró a la escuela de veterinaria? Eso era impensable para mi papá y mi mamá, que ambos eran profesores. Yo tenía que ser médico, punto. Mal. La oferta académica que se le da a los niños en primaria es en nuestros países sumamente limitada. Cuando uno ve las escuelas de otros lados del mundo, ¿no? Esas escuelas primarias alemanas o europeas son una maravilla. O sea, yo alguna vez conocí una en Hamburgo y tenía terrario, huerta, acuario, taller de mecánica, por supuesto una sala de música maravillosa, pues alemana, ¿no? Con todos los instrumentos para una orquesta de 52 maestros, ¿no? Había había todo. Había una cosa de mecánica, de motores, de motores de todo tipo, ¿no? Con imanes y con turbinas cortadas por la mitad para ver cómo eran por dentro y tal. O sea, a los niños se les ofrecían, ¿no? Se les ofrecía un amplio abanico de posibilidades de trabajar y de hacer cosas que les llamaran la atención, y se les permitía escoger qué querían. Desde que tenían 7 u 8 años ya sabían leer y escribir, tenían libertad de ir escogiendo qué querían, qué les gustaba. Bueno, una protección que uno observa, una protección contra el desgaste laboral, es que las personas no vivan solo para el trabajo. Aquel que vive solo para el trabajo, ¿no?, se arruina. O sea, solo trabajar y no tener más vida que trabajar es dañino en principio. A menos que el monto sublimatorio de esa tarea sea de tal magnitud que el sujeto realmente no necesite ni siquiera tener familia porque tiene su laboratorio. Y nunca se va a cansar y va a salir a las 12 de la noche de su trabajo y a las 6 va a estar ahí porque está enfrascado en una tarea que lo absorbe completamente. Pero esa es una minoría. La gente necesita, todos los seres humanos necesitamos una vida, para usar términos psicoanalíticos otra vez, una vida erótica, una vida con eros, una vida con poco tánatos y mucho eros, o sea, muchas cosas que sean placenteras, agradables, que acerquen al sujeto a los demás, que mantengan y promocionen la presencia de vínculos significativos, duraderos, llámense hijos, primos, familia, amigos o seres vivos que cuidar. Yo siempre cuento la historia de un colega al que encontré alguna vez en un vuelo a Buenos Aires, que iba con una jaulita con 3 canarios, ¿sí?, adentro, ¿no? Y iba al concurso de canto de canarios en Buenos Aires, concurso internacional de canto en Buenos Aires. Yo le dije, ¿tú qué haces aquí? Él es cirujano, pues cirujano supraespecialista. Me dijo, no, es que hay concurso de canarios y yo el año pasado, en el encuentro pasado, quedé de segundo. Dije, este canarito gris que ves ahí con plumitas amarillas, ese canario sacó el segundo puesto y ahora yo lo tengo perfecto, hasta le he dado por consejo, lo tengo un poco dopado. Le dije, ¿cómo así? Le doy una gota, ¿sí?, de testosterona diluida para que la zona de canto de la corteza cerebral del pájaro, que se despierta con la testosterona, ¿no?, lo haga cantar más largo y más apasionadamente. Entonces me dice, le cuento esto a usted porque usted me entiende y usted no va a ir allá al concurso ese, pero yo creo que me voy a ganar el primer puesto este año porque este animalito es una maravilla. Y entonces arrancó el avión y pusieron la ventilación, ¿sí? Y entonces él sacó un pañuelo y tapó la jaula y dice, las corrientes de aire les hacen daño, hazme el favor. Pero bueno, ¿pero qué es eso? Pues es otra vida, son otros intereses. O sea, yo creo que a eso no importa. Otra cosa que hacer que le guste, cantar en el coro de la parroquia o criar canarios o tener una huerta con lechugas, yo qué sé, cualquier cosa que sea realmente algo del gusto del sujeto. El otro factor protector es tener un grupo interno, o sea, un grupo de trabajo sólido. Esto es sumamente importante a mi juicio. Si uno confía en las personas con las que trabaja, se siente bien con ellos, ellos lo quieren a uno y uno los quiere a ellos y sabe sus nombres y está con ellos y está ahí, ¿no? Ese grupo de trabajo cercano, inmediato, el grupo del departamento o el grupo de la unidad, ¿no?, eso hace que tú te sientas mejor y que estés más a resguardo del burnout. ¿Qué pasa en la vida de los que tienen burnout ahora? Colegas, trabajan en 3 sitios distintos. Trabajan de 6 de la mañana a 10:30 en San Ignacio, de 11:30 a 5 en CETIC, de 5:30 de la tarde a 8:30, entonces hacen endoscopia, ¿sí?, en el country. Y corren por toda la ciudad, ¿no?, como envenenados, ¿sí?, en un Mercedes, claro, ¿sí?, que no han terminado de pagar, ¿no? O sea, y trabajan en 3 y 4 lugares diferentes y son incansables y ganan plata, pero la plata antes de que les haya entrado ya se ha ido para pagar las tarjetas de crédito, ¿sí? O sea, tratamos de vivir, y esto es una cosa local, colombiana, tratamos de vivir de un modo que no era deseable ni deseado hasta hace unos 40 o 50 años. ¿Sí? ¿A qué hago referencia? A una cosa triste y vergonzosa, la traquetización de nuestra cultura. ¿Sí? O sea, nos ponen unos baremos, unas instancias altísimas, ¿no? Si puedes comprar una botella de whisky de 40 millones de pesos, es puro traqueto esa vaina, ¿sí? O sea, pues vas a estar endeudado toda la vida. La aspiración desmesurada, la oferta constante, la presión de un neoliberalismo capitalista, dañino, consumista, pone a mucha gente a vivir en una perpetua carrera que puede que antes que el burnout lo mate de un infarto. Algunos de estos colegas que yo he visto a lo largo de estos últimos 20 años tienen 2 o 3 stents ya, no medicados, claro, colocados en sus coronarias, ¿no? Pero desarrollan ideas hipocondríacas y tienen todo el tiempo miedo de morirse, ¿no? Y a mí me parece que es inadecuado, por lo menos después de unos años de ejercicio profesional, que haya tantos médicos que están con tanto miedo de morirse, que no son capaces, no se han detenido a pensar, viven tan afanados que no piensan. ¿Sí? Y más si uno tiene que vivir en una ciudad como esta, ¿sí?, que es un infierno, ¿sí?, en términos de desplazamientos. ¿Sí? O sea, si tú tienes que gastarte, además de eso, 3 horas o 4 horas, ¿no?, sorteando el tránsito endemoniado de esta ciudad y preguntándole ahí a la voz auditora del Waze, ¿por dónde me voy?, ¿no?, y terminar como terminó alguno de esos colegas en un barrio miserable, ¿sí?, por el occidente de la ciudad, que le dijo, vétase por acá, y el tipo se metió, doble a la derecha, doble a la izquierda. El Waze no tiene criterio social. Terminó en un hueco por allá abajo de Suba, ¿sí?, en donde se dio cuenta cuando llegó a un callejón ahí, una calle cerrada, con gente que lo miraba con apetito, ¿sí?, a él y a su Mercedes, ¿no? Entonces ahí, ¿sí?, se puso a llorar y ahí decidió que iba a renunciar a uno de sus trabajos e iba a buscar ayuda, porque estuvo a punto, él sentía eso por lo menos, ¿sí?, de que lo atracaran o lo mataran y tal. Bueno, ¿sí? Entonces yo le decía, bueno, pero usted mismo se ofrece como presa, ¿sí?, ¿no?, con su Mercedes S300 JK o con alguna vaina de esas, ¿no?, con un Rolex de 100 millones de pesos en la muñeca, ¿no?, y todo vestidito lindo de cirugía, ¿no?, con el pechito al aire y tal, ¿no? O sea, ¿qué está haciendo? ¿Sí? Bueno, en fin, volvamos al asunto. Yo sí creo que deberíamos tener medios para identificar lo más certeramente posible la autenticidad de la vocación de los estudiantes que ingresan a las facultades de medicina. Primera cosa. Segunda cosa, deberíamos tener filtros, digamos, de naturaleza psicoevaluativa, o sea, de pruebas de personalidad y pruebas de habilidad y tal, para el posgrado aún más estrictas. Eso en nuestra facultad dejó de hacerse hace muchos años porque resultaba muy costoso. ¿Sí? ¿Qué más? Sí. Hay que propender porque en el trabajo se constituyan grupos de trabajo genuinamente solidarios y que sean capaces de apoyarse entre sí, de compartir información, de compartir conocimiento y de ser grupo en el sentido real del término grupo, como fue acuñado hace muchos años ya. O sea, un grupo es un conjunto de personas que se conocen entre sí, que conocen sus características individuales. No estoy diciendo que se quieran, sino que sienten la satisfacción de aquello que los une como grupo secundario, que es la tarea. Es hacer la tarea y que la tarea quede bien hecha y que esa tarea sea compartida y sea sentida por todos como una tarea conjunta y que tiene sentido. Ese es el otro punto, que tiene sentido. Tiene sentido diagnosticar precozmente cáncer de colon. Tiene sentido diagnosticar precozmente cánceres gástricos. Tiene sentido hacer que, no sé, que las mujeres todas se pongan vacuna de papiloma, yo qué sé. O sea, tiene sentido. Tiene sentido hacer que los niños crezcan sanos, que la lactancia materna sea larga. Tiene sentido. Cualquiera de esas cosas en cualquiera de las áreas de la medicina le confiere sentido al quehacer y le confiere entonces sentido a la existencia. Ahí estoy en puro Víctor Frankl, ¿no? ¿Qué más? Uno no le puede decir a la gente que lleve a cabo una actividad que le complazca por fuera del trabajo. Eso es algo que uno tiene que buscar y tiene que encontrar. Uno no le puede decir a alguien, tu hobby va a ser tu hobby va a ser criar canarios de canto y llevarlos a los concursos mundiales de canto de canarios. No. Eso cada uno tiene que descubrirlo. Pero para descubrirlo se tiene que ser introspectivo. O sea, a mí me gusta tal cosa, a mí me gusta tocar saxofón, a mí me gusta leer historia, a mí me gusta hacer tal cosa, eso, lo que sea. Es interesante que mucha gente no lo logra, ¿sí? Que mucha gente, uno habla con ellos y resulta que no tienen nada fuera de su trabajo. En 4 sitios distintos, sin ningún grupo de apoyo real en ninguno de ellos, porque si tú trabajas en 3 sitios, no perteneces a ninguno. No tienes ningún sentimiento de pertenencia real a un lugar y a un grupo de personas, ¿sí? Esto tiene finalmente otro componente. De unos 30 años para acá cambió radicalmente el modo de contratación de los médicos. Cada vez más los médicos trabajan a destajo, como peones, ¿sí? O sea, no trabajan en un sitio para siempre, en mi hospital, para siempre aquí en el mismo, con la gente que me conoce y yo conozco y sé todo lo de mi sitio. Si trabajo en 4 sitios a la vez, no tengo ningún sitio, ¿sí? De todos obtengo dinero, pero en ninguno realmente ni me consideran de ahí, ¿no? Ni me ven como propio, ni yo los veo como propios. Son simplemente lugares de extractividad, lugares a los que yo voy a extraer una cierta cantidad de dinero por mes, ¿no? Para terminar de pagar el Mercedes. Muy bien. En términos de realidad nuestra, digamos, local, yo estoy haciendo desde hace 18 años en el Hospital San Ignacio grupos Valiant. He llegado a tener hasta 12 grupos Valiant semanales, ahora tengo 10, ¿sí? Y esos 10 grupos, a esos 10 grupos van en promedio más o menos de 10 a 11 personas por grupo, ¿sí? O sea, veo 100 personas por semana, ¿no? Del Hospital San Ignacio. Cada grupo de esos tiene una vida media de 2,5, 3 años, ¿sí? Aunque hay grupos, 1 o 2, que siguen ahí desde hace 12 o 13 años. Eso es una prueba, como podría yo mismo decirme en plan destructivo, ¿sí? Esa es una prueba de que los grupos Valiant no sirven. Porque si llevas 12 o 13 años haciendo el grupo, es que el grupo no sirve. El detalle es que a esos grupos ingresan gentes, bueno, grupos abiertos, ¿no? Entran gentes, salen gentes y vuelven otras gentes del mismo servicio, ¿sí? El grupo más antiguo que tengo es el grupo de radiología, pero es un grupo de profesores y residentes que se renuevan, los residentes en concreto, cada 3 años. ¿Sí? ¿Eso sirve para qué? Sirve para que la gente construya eso, que se construya un grupo solidario, un grupo amistoso, un grupo respetuoso, se conocen, es increíble, pero miren, hay gente que ha trabajado toda la vida con un colega o 2 colegas en una unidad y que no saben nada del otro, no saben ni siquiera dónde vive, ni saben qué hace, ni saben dónde nació, ni saben si es casado o si ya va por su 5º divorcio, no sabemos nada del otro. ¿Sí? Y el no saber nada del otro le hace daño a uno, ¿sí? Y al otro. ¿Sí? Los vínculos sanos, ¿sí?, son otra cosa importante. ¿Qué es un vínculo sano? En términos de lo que estamos hablando, un vínculo sano es un vínculo que se construye entre los sujetos que comparten una tarea con sentido, no una tarea que carece de sentido. O sea, si yo me dedico a dar anestesia, ¿sí?, en una clínica privada durante 6 horas cada día y después me voy para el hospital militar otras 6 horas y hago turnos de noche en 2 instituciones más de anestesia, ¿no? ¿Qué pasa con ese señor? Hombre, ese señor, entre otras cosas, me refiero a un colega específico, sí, ese señor está muerto, bueno. ¿Sí? O sea, se murió en menos de 16 horas, ¿sí?, porque después dijeron que había sido COVID, pero nunca lo sabremos. ¿Sí? O sea, dormía, él mismo lo decía, dormía más o menos 3 horas diarias. Tenía 3 exesposas que lo ordeñaban juiciosamente, ¿sí?, y tenía con cada una de ellas un par de hijos. ¿Sí? Entonces, ¿qué? ¿Sí? Pues siquiera se murió, ¿me entienden? Qué alivio para él. Ya. Dejó de estar. Tenía burnout. A lo mejor ni siquiera se había enterado. Pero era malquerido. ¿Sí? Era brusco, era grosero, era despectivo, ofendía a la gente, ¿no? Ganaba mucho dinero y eso es otro síntoma de burnout. La irritabilidad constante, el maltrato a los otros, el trato despectivo, profesores que dan una clase y de entrada dicen, yo nunca estudiaría medicina, la medicina es una porquería, sálganse ahora que todavía pueden. O sea, hay profesores que hablan mal de su profesión y que la denigran y que dicen que fueron unos estúpidos y que eso no sirve para nada. O sea, despojar de sentido a lo que hacemos, ¿sí?, es abrir la puerta al burnout y a su hija primogénita, la depresión. Y al hacer eso, al estar en la depresión, negada casi siempre o autotratada muchas veces, también le estamos abriendo la puerta a otras cosas. ¿A otras cosas como cuáles? Como diabetes tipo 2, como hipertensión esencial, como cáncer también, ¿sí?, que mata mucho médico, formas implícitas de suicidio, ¿sí?, tomar trago, comer demasiado, no hacer ejercicio, no tener una vida sana, porque tampoco tienen una vida, y menos sana. Sabemos ahora, ¿sí?, que el actor, digamos, neuroendocrino que está detrás de todo eso son los niveles altos de cortisol. Y sabemos claramente, y cada vez hay más y más publicaciones y trabajos que muestran cómo la gente que tiene burnout y que puntúa alto en la escala primera de burnout que todavía se usa, si le tomas una muestra de cortisol, tiene el cortisol sumamente elevado. O sea, esto va llegando, ¿sí?, a la posibilidad de medir, de detectar de una manera cuantitativa, como les gusta a muchos, o sea, con un examen ahí hecho, ¿sí? Mire, tanto de cortisol, mijo, ¿no? La vida se le está arruinando con eso, ¿sí? Eso baja la competencia inmunológica, eso impide un sueño reparador, eso propicia la ansiedad y la agresividad, ¿sí? Disminuye la libido, ¿sí? O sea, todo lo que los pacientes con desgaste laboral relatan. Todo lo que hagamos para disminuir la tensión en la que vivimos, todo lo que hagamos para ser más introspectivos y pensar más en nosotros mismos, posiblemente ayuda a que seamos menos víctimas de nuestro propio empeño de ser buenos o de ser superiores o de ser mejores que los demás o de ganar más plata que los demás. Todo eso empuja a la gente al desgaste laboral. Bueno, eso era lo que quería decirles. Si tienen, hay 5 minutos todavía para mí, si tienen una pregunta o quieren hacer alguna explicación adicional o quieren ayudarme a completar el tema que he discutido, con mucho gusto. Dígame. Pues digamos que yo, a ver, primero que todo, yo haría una selección más estricta de los estudiantes, una selección aún más estricta de los residentes, ¿sí? O sea, para recibir solamente gente que sea realmente competente y que sea hábil y que sea, y para las que tenga sentido ser lo que quieren ser. Porque es que, ¿me entiendes? El otro día en unas entrevistas de alguna especialidad, ¿no?, nos enteramos al finalizar la entrevista del aspirante que había hecho 23 solicitudes previas en otras universidades, ¿sí?, para hacer una especialidad distinta de la que estaba postulándose. O sea, ese no nos sirve, ¿sí? Había optado 23 veces por cirugía plástica y dermatología, ¿no?, y se estaba presentando a otra completamente distinta que nada tiene que ver con dermatología ni con eso. O sea, ¿qué está haciendo? Está tratando de profesionalizarse a como dé lugar, buscando algo que sea rentable, o sea, que dé dinero. Así no es. Dime. Sí, claro, es clarísimo. Sí, claro. La remuneración insuficiente hace daño, claro. Debería, además, la remuneración dispar también hace daño, pero eso ya requiere una mirada institucional. O sea, que haya, no sé, escalas salariales como hay en otras partes. Uno gana tanta plata si es médico general, tanta plata mínima si es especialista, tanta plata mínima si es supraespecialista, ¿no? Pero también hay unos topes, porque ocurre en nuestro país, y todos lo saben, específicamente a partir de los fines del siglo pasado, ¿no?, pues existen colegas, existen especialidades cuyos ejercitadores ganan cantidades enormes de dinero. O sea, cifras que uno dice, pero imposible, ¿sí? No me gano yo en un año lo que este hombre se gana en un mes, ¿sí?, haciendo cirugías bariátricas, ¿sí?, ¿no?, y haciendo que la gente adelgace cuando nunca estuvo gorda. Pero todo eso es, no, pues perverso y es inmoral, ¿sí?, y es antiético médicamente hablando, pero sabemos que ocurre. Bueno, sí, dígame. Primero cuando hay un exceso de trabajo, pero la noción de exceso de trabajo, que es primordial para el diagnóstico de burnout, es relativa. O sea, hacer, ¿qué digo yo? Hacer un trasplante hepático, ¿sí?, pues puede ser terriblemente desgastante. O sea, ningún cirujano debería hacer, digo yo, más de un trasplante hepático por semana. Pero si tú haces 4 trasplantes hepáticos semanales, pues estás abriendo la puerta al burnout. ¿Sí? Mira, el ejemplo que tengo yo, que conocí más o menos de cerca hace unos años, es el de los controladores aéreos. Los controladores aéreos trabajan en turnos de 4 a 6 horas, punto. Si es de día, si es en el momento pues de mayor tránsito o de mayor tráfico aéreo, 4 horas. Porque tienen a su cargo la vida, ¿no?, de 200 pasajeros por avión y entra un avión cada 30 segundos o sale. Entonces, esos sujetos no pueden trabajar más de 6 horas en el día, nunca. Y les pagan, pues por supuesto, les pagan bien. Bueno, y nosotros no somos de cierto modo tan importantes en algunas áreas, por lo menos, como un controlador aéreo. O sea, un cirujano, un ortopedista de trauma. O sea, ¿cuántos reemplazos de cadera puede hacer un ortopedista a la semana? O sea, ¿cuántos? ¿3 al día? Algunos de los bariátricos, ¿no?, fenomenales que esta sociedad narcisista ha parido en las últimas 3 décadas, ¿no?, hacen hasta 6 cirugías bariátricas diarias, ¿sí?, en una clínica privada en Bogotá, y van el viernes y el sábado a Pereira y el domingo y el lunes a Barranquilla, que son los sitios donde más gente está ávida de perder grasa corporal. Y se gana, dicen, no, alrededor de 700 millones de pesos mensuales. ¿Sí? ¿Qué es eso? ¿Sí? Claro, además de la envidia brutal que eso produce, ¿sí? O sea, no, pues ese es un comportamiento absolutamente cuestionable desde todos los ángulos. ¿Sí? Además, nadie le cuida, o sea, él nunca cuida un posoperatorio. Él ni siquiera sabe cómo se llaman las personas que operan. O sea, no existe ninguna razón para hacer eso que no sea ganar y ganar y ganar dinero. Una cosa más para terminar que se estaba olvidando. Una cosa que parece proteger notablemente a los médicos del desgaste laboral es que se pueda crear un vínculo médico-paciente real, ¿sí?, en el trabajo. Eso parecería ser que muchos psiquiatras y psicoanalistas tengan mucho menor frecuencia de burnout que otras especialidades. Nosotros trabajamos mucho, los psiquiatras, toda la vida, pero establecemos relaciones o tratamos de establecer, por la naturaleza de nuestro trabajo, tratamos de establecer un vínculo médico-paciente real. Y eso es satisfactorio para ambos y es gratificante y es libidinalmente bueno para uno. ¿Sí? Y lo mantiene sano a uno. Me acordé de la dedicatoria de Vivo en uno de sus libros que dice: a mis pacientes que me pagaron por enseñarme. Pero bueno, muchas gracias.
Bueno, muchas gracias, doctor Santa Cruz, por sus inspiradoras palabras. Damos continuidad entonces a la siguiente conferencia. Quisiera invitar al señor decano, doctor Carlos Gómez Restrepo, a unas palabras de bienvenida para nuestro invitado internacional.
Bueno, agradezco al doctor Myers su presencia It's a pleasure to have you here. I will invite you in a minute here, okay? So, el doctor Myers lo conocimos con el doctor Gabriel Oviedo en medio de una dificultad que tuvimos acá en la universidad y nos ha ayudado mucho a pensar todas las circunstancias de la salud en los médicos. Alrededor de esto venimos trabajando de tiempo atrás en el departamento de psiquiatría. Yo creo que venimos desde hace muchos años, desde su fundación, básicamente. Los problemas médicos, como ya lo decía el doctor Santa Cruz, han incrementado el burnout, claramente como lo comentan. Las cifras van del 30 al 55, 60% de burnout en los médicos. Igualmente ha incrementado el suicidio. El suicidio es 2 veces mayor a 3 veces mayor en el gremio médico y de enfermería a todas las profesiones y es mayor en mujeres que en hombres también, que es algo bien importante. Las depresiones son más frecuentes, las ansiedades, etc. Y alrededor de eso es que la Javeriana quiere trabajar fuertemente como lo ha venido haciendo para favorecer el bienestar médico y el bienestar de las enfermeras y profesionales de la salud. Y esto es lo que nos hizo hoy convocar la reunión que preparamos con el doctor Gabriel Oviedo, quien va a presentar a nuestro invitado especial, además de Hernán, que ya lo hizo y que lo conocemos mucho acá, va a presentar al doctor Myers de su trayectoria y que es el conferencista que viene. Doctor Gabriel.
Muchas gracias, doctor Gómez. El doctor Michael Myers es reconocido mundialmente como una de las voces más influyentes en la comprensión del sufrimiento de los médicos. Su trabajo ha iluminado una realidad muchas veces silenciada, que quienes dedican su vida a cuidar la salud de otros también están en riesgo de quebrarse, de deprimirse y de morir por suicidio. El doctor Myers ha acompañado durante décadas a médicos y familias marcadas por esta tragedia y ha transformado esas experiencias en conocimiento, compasión y guías concretas para la prevención. Entre otros, su libro ¿Por qué los médicos mueren por suicidio? No solo recoge testimonios de dolor, sino que también ofrece claves para humanizar la medicina, derribar el estigma y promover una cultura de autocuidado, solidaridad y apoyo entre colegas. Escuchar al doctor Myers es fundamental porque nos recuerda que la salud de los médicos no es un asunto privado, sino un bien común, del que depende la seguridad de los pacientes y el futuro de nuestra profesión. Invito especialmente al doctor Myers a que nos acompañe en este evento, en esta primera conferencia, protegiendo la salud mental de nuestros estudiantes de medicina, residentes y profesores, una perspectiva internacional. Thank you, Michael.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I bring you warm greetings from New York City. I'm delighted to be here and have this opportunity to speak about such an important subject. These are the learning objectives that I'm hoping that by the time that my talk is finished and we have discussion, that you'll have a sense of what I've projected here. That we know about the vulnerabilities of all of us who train in medicine, mental health difficulties especially, and the challenges of medical school and residency training, counseling professionals, and the psychiatrists who actually look after our colleagues in need. And I'm going to go over very quickly 7 diagnostic and what I think are key principles having to do with assessing and treating physicians, and then some tips for self-care that will build on the previous speaker. I wanted to just ask, can I turn this just a little bit that I can see so that I don't need to keep, okay, great. Great, that's good. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Okay, I don't expect you to be able to read this, but I wanted to this is just a screenshot of something that I took in preparation to come to Columbia about studies that are actually occurring right here. And this is a cross-sectional anxiety and depression. And you're basically able to see that we're talking really within a range of, well, as it says here, this is the age group of 18 to 25, and the findings, the response rate, and so a significant period of anxiety, depression that compares with the general population. So as you can see, ours is really much higher. And this is pretty standard, really, not just here in Columbia, but in other parts of the world as well. This actually talks about sleep disturbances, academic performance, depressive symptoms, which all make sense. But when you look at this, what you're able to see here is that you're able to see, though, that there's a lot of difficulty in sleep that probably has a lot to do with studying, or also being on call, working long hours. And they also talk about the use of energy drinks in trainees as well, having to do with probably caffeine largely. And that can become a problem, actually, if it really becomes habituated. Actually, that was done right here. So I wanted to now just go into some of the clinical things that we actually see in medicine. The prevalence of depression, depressive symptoms, that's been across the board now. Now see, this study is really about 10 years old, but we really don't have anything that's really newer with evidence-based. So as you can see, 27.2%. It's always concerned me that we have that much suicidal ideation that accompanies depression. I really wish that that was 0. I mean, there's a big difference, as you know, between thoughts of suicide and actually attempting suicide. But even to be entertaining thoughts of taking one's life is really, really very serious. So that's basically just analysis of that, and it's a very famous study. About anxiety disorders, there's actually less research on this, but as you can see, they're significant as well. So as high as 24%. And this is more recent, okay, because this was a paper that was just published in Lancet a couple of years ago, 2021. So cross-sectional, general, and that's GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, the features there. I'm just really putting these up, I just wanted to, because my presentation is largely going to be stories, but I wanted to just give you a framework for this. And here's one right here. Now, this is a story of Paul, who was referred to me actually by his wife, who was very, very concerned about him, and this was something from a previous publication. It shares very brief, but I just wanted to read to you that he was a 4th-year medical student. He came for assessment, and he had been charged with impaired driving and also having his driver's license suspended. This was humiliating for him, and his wife, Claire, had been trying unsuccessfully to get him to seek treatment for alcoholism for at least 2 years. He often drank too much, especially on weekends. And by the way, episodic type drinking is not uncommon, actually, as opposed to daily drinking, which is later in the course of the illness. But episodic drinking has a lot to do with the training and responsibilities of medical students and residents. And during these times, she found him boisterous. He was very touchy and sarcastic, not only with her, but with their friends as well. And this was embarrassing for her. And he also had alcoholic blackouts during those episodes. But he rationalized this by saying because he had never struck her and never drank when he was on call, he considered his drinking, and I quote him, no different than any of the other medical students. And so he was trying to normalize, basically, what was really quite a serious problem. And look at the genetic loading. His father, a brother, 2 paternal uncles, and 2 maternal aunts. So that's on both sides of the family. We've known a long time about the genetic diathesis for substance use disorders. They were all severely alcoholic. When I pointed this out to him, he dismissed this as unimportant. Okay? Now, this is a 4th-year medical student. So it really tells you that even though he had had a lot of medical training and exposure, the degree of his denial. I used a lot of motivational interviewing techniques with him in order to get him to a point where he was then willing to entertain going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and then was assessed to and got into a specific group for doctors. And that was really how he maintained his sobriety. The prognosis for physicians with substance use disorders is actually very, very good. Some of these challenges, this is something that I talked about before, so this isn't in DSM, this has to do with some of the things that all of you in this room as medical students, or those of us who have been medical students ourselves, it's a big transition. And you're learning this whole new language of medical jargon. It's a new role. As you become a young professional. Coming to terms with the fact that you can't know it all, you can't learn it all, and what is considered sort of an acceptable amount. And for the first time, facing academic decline, this is the first time many students have actually got anything less than an A on an exam, or perhaps even actually failed something. And this takes some getting used to, and with, of course, a lot of support. Leaving families and friends and supports, if you're not from, in this case, here in Bogota, if you've come from other places, you may miss those individuals as well, depending on how often you can visit, as you acquire a new family in the place of where you're studying. And then relationships that we heard about, just the importance of that. And this could be actually forming a serious relationship with someone, or the other way around, that you were already in a relationship that isn't working through this whole transition in your life, and you end up actually going through a separation, which can be difficult, but yet healthy while you're in medical school. Coming to terms with one's sexual orientation or gender identity. And then developmental tasks. You have to become more mature, and you will be, because you're taking on increasing amounts of responsibility, especially, of course, when you get into your clinical years. I don't know here, certainly in the United States, the debt for the graduating medical student is roughly $250,000. It's extremely high. Ethical dilemmas that confront you, very important, interesting as well. You may question your spiritual and religious beliefs, of which you've grown up with. Abusive behavior. We know much, much more about this at our medical centers. Patients who are perpetrators, sometimes residents who themselves may even be burned out. That gets projected onto the medical students. Residents attending physicians, that sort of thing. We call it now bullying, that language. Facing serious illness and death in family members. And that can be hard too if you can't spend the time with them that you would like to because of the importance and the demand of your studies. I just know I've looked after so many individuals who lost a parent during medical training, and they only wish in hindsight that they would have been able to take a break so that they could spend time perhaps with a dying parent, or even afterwards have a bereavement leave. But they they stayed for a few days, maybe a week, came back. Everybody was supportive, but you have to get right back to your studying and duties very, very quickly. And then this question, do I really want to be a doctor? Is this really coming from within, or am I feeling the pressure from my family that there is nothing acceptable except being a doctor? Increasingly, we're seeing physicians who are now accepting something like, we have something called physician assistants, or perhaps becoming a nurse practitioner, or something like that, that is respectable, but they feel that that's much more palatable for them, which is good. This is just a story about quality of life, and it's an ethnographic study, and I wanted to just put this up here because, again, it's also from your country in Colombia. But really the importance of the quality of life, and this connects with so-called wellness. We used to think of wellness as just the absence of disease, but of course we know it's much, much more than that. It's actually feeling wealthy and healthy in one's physical life, one's mental life, one's spiritual life, those sorts of things. So, and this is in internal medicine residents, and how they feel that the whole quality of their life is really so compromised by those very long duty hours or being on call frequently and things like that. I wanted to just mention suicide. I'll be talking about this much, much more tomorrow. But the study of Colombian anesthesiologists, and this was not an actual study of the numbers who had died, but this was a study of anesthesiologists of whether they knew of somebody in anesthesiology who had died by suicide. And so it's really by association. And it was just a wake-up call that this is a branch of medicine which is at higher risk, as we are in psychiatry and in general medicine as well, at risk of a higher risk of suicide. So we're often asked, so why do we have the rates of depression that we do in medical students and then beyond in physicians? And it really makes a lot of sense. What the general public often doesn't know is that the incidence of depression prevalence is very high in our society. We know this through the WHO. And so why would we be immune? We're citizens as well. And then, so just think about that first, and especially in young people. Those of you who work in child and adolescent psychiatry will really know that that's something that we're going through right now. Through the pandemic and post-pandemic, higher rates of depression in our young adolescents. So the wounded healer notion is what that is. For some of you may be familiar with this, is that we're attracted, those of us who are wounded healers are attracted to the health professions. So I'm talking specifically about medicine this morning, but we want to become doctors because of our either personal woundedness growing up, or that we come from families wherein we sort of became the designated caretaker, or the person who kind of took our mother to her doctor's appointments because English, in my case, was, the first language, that sort of thing. Or that there was dysfunction in the family or something like that, and we're attracted to the field. So these are the most empathic physicians generally, but they're also the ones who, though, can be at risk because they, too, are human, of course. Then genetic loading, which, of course, we have to pay attention to, and which we just, saw in that vignette about Paul. In a previous episode of psychiatric illness in childhood and adolescence, we must remember that a medical student or a resident may actually end up having a recurrence through their training, and to just be aware of that and sensitive to that, and to get a good history, because the treatment plan may be exactly almost a carbon copy of the way they were treated before, which will work very effectively, and especially if they come for help early. Childhood trauma, we know so much more about that now than we did, and that we're not immune to it. And once again, this kind of feeds into the wounded healer notion too. Let me take a minute to talk about perfectionism. Now, as you know, you have to be somewhat perfectionistic to even get into medical school, to get those grades, to compete, to get that coveted spot. And then you have to be somewhat perfectionistic to remain in medical school and get into residency. And then to get your qualifications and keep up beyond that then and become a doctor with lifelong learning and those kinds of things. And as you know, we all largely sort of work that out, and we call it maybe a commitment to excellence. Perfectionism, though we do know, is a risk factor for depression, but generally only when it's hypertrophied. And those are the individuals in medicine who can't forgive themselves at all, or they can't cut themselves, what we call the idiom, can't cut themselves any slack. You know, we try to reassure them, but they say, I shouldn't have gotten a B, or I should have been able to work 36 hours without taking a nap, or something, these kinds of things. And, you know, it gets easier as we get more mature and get older, and to be able to see that we can still be very good doctors and still have a life. So that's where perfectionism, and it responds nicely to CBT principles. So it can be very, very helpful for that. Expectations and demands, those training programs that are much more holistic and where our trainees feel that this is a good place to train. It's like one big family. Those students thrive. They do so much better. And the so-called microaggressions that we read about, and those are they're called micro because they're small, but they can be very big when or if they pile up. And those have to do with things like ethnic slurs, comments, critical comments about one's religion, being LGBTQ+, all of these kinds of things that are really, really very, very important. Now, mistreatment and bullying can really be, and the AAMC, by the way, is our National Association for Medical Schools and Training. But look at that, about 1/3, they've personally experienced public humiliation during their training. They had witnessed unprofessional behavior by faculty members, residents, or peers. So the bottom line is to get these individuals to speak up, but because especially medical students feel so low on the totem pole, it's very hard for them to speak up. So I want to tell you about 2 initiatives that we have where I work at SUNY Downstate. I started there in 2008, and after 6 months there, the dean asked me if I would take on the role of ombudsman, or to be gender-specific ombudsperson, for our medical students who were confronting any type of mistreatment. And I volunteered to do that, and I continue to do that now. So then any medical student then reports to me, and I sort that out, that kind of thing, so that we have a mechanism. About 5 years ago, we realized that there were many medical students who weren't coming to me, who were subject to all kinds of mistreatments, but they didn't want to disclose who they were, as they would have to do by calling me up, by sending me an email, by meeting with me. So we developed something else called Kudos and Concerns, which is an anonymous portal. So they can submit any type of complaint where they feel that they have been mistreated. And then we have a whole team now, and it's multidisciplinary. I'm the only psychiatrist on that. We have others of other branches of medicine. And then we work out these incidents, and it's really helped. This is all part of what's called our Learning Environment Committee, and it's really working very, very nicely, so that therefore, when our medical students graduate and they do this questionnaire, the complaints now are much, much less, because before they would say, well, nobody does anything, so you just, as they say, suck it up in the vernacular. So I just wanted to tell you about that. So, and now these are the voices of medical students. And this, I salute you, because you are changing the culture of medicine in many, many ways. So they're saying, why can't we talk about our vulnerability? Here's one right here. She's a 3rd-year medical student, identifies herself, and talks about that. And how about this one? Here's a 4th-year medical student. Why can't we talk about depression and suicide openly, personal testimonials? We need to share our experiences. Collective, we must accept our human vulnerability, foster openness as our liberation. Let us speak. This is, when I was studying medicine, there's no way you would hear this kind of thing. It really is, as we say, moving the needle. And that's called the shadow of shame. Trying to get rid of that shame. And this is a wonderful piece. I've come to know this man who is now, he was a medical student when I met him, but he's now become a forensic psychiatrist. Now, he wrote this in the Washington Post. This is a general newspaper for the whole world to read. And it's about being diagnosed with depression and how he did the diagnosis first. Then he spoke to his family. His mother is a physician, and she insisted that he get to care quickly, what he did, and he's received treatment. And he's just been very, very public about it. And he does a lot of narrative writing, Dr. Morris. Now, I want to introduce you to Dr. Rahul Gupta. I met her when she was a medical student, when I read her piece in the Journal of the American Medical Association. And she called it, I Solemnly Share. And you're going to hear about this in just a moment. I reached out to her because what it was is that she decided to write about a very serious suicidal depression that she experienced at the University of Michigan as a medical student. And because she did not attempt suicide and got care, then she took a medical leave. But while she was on medical leave, she learned that one of the residents had taken his life. And with that, she decided, this is not right. I'm going to talk openly about this. And she made this videotape because she said, we need to get the message out there. People should not, and medicine should not have to be self-destructive. And so, let me just, it's not, this slide I wanted to just tell you, but she did her training in psychiatry, then she did a fellowship in child and adolescent, and she's just started a practice in Pasadena, California. So when I reached out with her, then she took part in the American Psychiatric Association annual meetings twice. Once was during the pandemic, so it was virtual. But she's continued to fight stigma, and she did this while in medical school, then in residency, and now continues to speak out about it. So let me just play this, which she composed. I need to get, so I can, there it is, okay. Oh, no, sorry, I went too far. I got to get back. If you can just get. It's 4 minutes.
Depression is not weakness.
Though depression is a disease that may make you feel weak.
Depression is neither laziness
Nor apathy.
Nor a lack of professional fortitude.
It is an expression
of an underlying neurobiological pathology
About which researchers still have many questions.
It is a pathology that,
Like a many-tentacled octopus, grasps at our emotional stability, our cognition, our sleep.
our patience with people,
And our will to go on.
Depression is a pathology that can obscure our personhood
So that it is hard for others
and for ourselves,
to see us as we really are. Admitting to experiencing depression
is not weakness.
but rather confirmation.
Of an insidious, life-threatening epidemic in the medical profession.
on a very simple level.
It constitutes an admission of humanness.
I'm so glad you did this.
Oh, yeah.
It's important.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Even as I speak these words, a great fear swells and rises in my throat,
Threatening to take me over. At least for me.
Shame has never quite relinquished its grip on vulnerability.
and vulnerability is deeply uncomfortable. As an aspiring doctor,
As a doctor,
I may be committing professional self-sabotage.
by telling my story,
my prospective employers
May judge me to be unstable.
and unfit to care for ill persons.
but the tears of my colleagues
the tales of deferred suicide attempts,
my colleagues have confided in,
and the tragic deaths of bright minds.
here and around the country.
lend strength to my determination to proclaim my experience.
To say, me too.
I admit openly
That I'm just as vulnerable,
To the elements of life,
as are my future patients.
in the hopes that others will do the same.
I do so in the hopes
That the culture of the medical profession
Will evolve to value imperfection.
as a hallmark of humanity,
and that this value will govern
the way we judge our students and our residents.
if I have learned anything,
After spending the majority of my short life,
in pursuit of academic distinction.
it is that the appeal of the dividends
Good grades, high praise, awards.
Is ephemeral.
not so with the call to protect human life.
That is something truly worth living for.
It's absurd. Like this. That's why this is so brave. Because people don't do that often. And like, it's so common in third year, especially, and in fourth, like all throughout medical school. Just never feeling good enough and never feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like admitting that is really. I applaud you. I am very touched by this.
I wanted to just tell you that I use this short video a lot in my teaching. It's really very important because it really, I think, gives, first of all, it's medical student driven, but it really just gives just a picture of something that is kind of mysterious to a lot of people. They really don't sort of know what the illness of depression is really, really like. I want to tell you about Dr. Thomas. He came to me, and I wanted to just share with you. Okay. Because his story is a very interesting one. He was a 33-year-old black physician. He was a junior resident in cardiology. And he came to see me. He's quite depressed. And he had a history of a previous illness in medical school, which I was able to treat very easily just following the treatment from before, but a significant history of mood disorders in his family and suicide. And so major depressive disorder recurrent was my working diagnosis. Started him on the same antidepressant. Within 10 days, he began to feel a little bit better. And with improvement of his mood and cognition, I got a lot of valuable history and some psychosocial factors that maybe was the precipitant of this now. So he felt very isolated in his department. He was the only black resident, and there were no faculty, academic or clinical, who were black. In fact, I'm it, was what he said to me. There were minority nurses, aides, laboratory technicians, clerical staff, and housekeeping personnel, but not one was black. I've had a couple of black patients, and that's been refreshing. I think I'm a bit of an oddity in this city. Now, he had attended a mostly minority student medical school, and so this is really quite a shift for him. So what he was saying was that when he came here to do cardiology, he found this actually very foreign. Secondly, he was single. He was a very good-looking man, and he said to me, I get a lot of attention from the nurses and others at work. I've done a lot of dating. It's great for the ego. Most of the women ask me out. Easy sex, too. But there's no intimacy. It's very empty. and very, very lonely. And thirdly, Dr. Thomas felt dismissed for what he called his humanistic side. And listen to this quote: "I've always been interested in storytelling. It's part of my Black heritage, going back so many generations. This is what attracted me to medicine. I would have pursued psychiatry, but I'm in cardiology because heart disease is rampant in my family, and I want to contribute to research into this killer. But my attendings are not interested in the nuts and bolts of my patients' lives. They've been very critical of the time I spend at the bedside in my presentations at rounds." And with that, he got very teary and said, "That hurts." So that was an example of somebody who felt kind of shut down because of his sort of humanistic side in medicine. Maybe if we have some discussion from any cardiologists who are here today or internal medicine people. I want to tell you about a mentee of mine, Dr. Kaldilkar, who made a near-lethal suicide attempt over 20 years ago. I didn't know him at the time, but I got to know him because of my research. And I was living in Vancouver, Canada, and he was in Ottawa. It's across the country. I had a meeting coming up, I think it was about a year after his injury, and I met him, and I have followed him over the years. And he just published this piece in JAMA Neurology, as you can see, very recently in 2022. He had suffered from depression in medical school, and he thought that he was sort of largely going to be okay. He left Montreal to study in a new setting in Ottawa. He was post-call, lonely, isolated, hadn't met with his new psychiatrist yet, and had a resurgence of suicidal feelings, and it was building up and building up. He ended up jumping from his apartment, which was 6 stories up, and he suffered a T4 spinal cord injury. And so he's been paralyzed from the chest down since that time. He's had a very rough go of this. He wasn't able to return to it. Well, first of all, he didn't want to continue living, as you can imagine. Suicide, those of you who work at all with spinal cord injury patients would know that suicidal thinking and a suicidal diathesis is not uncommon for some time after such a catastrophic injury. But most get through that with very good physical therapy, of course, but also psychotherapy. And anyway, he did, Amol did. And then he was not able to return to internal medicine. He did try physical medicine and rehab, but that didn't work for him. But he has finished a residency in epidemiology and public health and does great work in that field. But he has had a lot of decubitus ulcer surgery, and it's really been a very long haul for him. He's absolutely amazing in his fortitude to keep going on. And so he came to a point where he said, I think I'm ready to talk about this. It was so interesting because he gave me consent to interview him many years ago when I wrote a book with a colleague of mine called Carla Fine. It was called Touched by Suicide, Hope and Healing After Loss. And that whole story is in that book. And then he went underground for about 8 years and didn't want to talk about it. When people would ask, he said that he just had an accident. And it's only been about the last 5 years that he's been much more public in telling people that he is like this because he tried to kill himself. And so then when he wrote this piece in JAMA Neurology, he has had emails and contacts from all over the world. It's been absolutely amazing. And just last year, I had him speak to our PGY3 residents in psychiatry virtually, and that was a very moving and powerful experience for them to actually meet him. Anyway, I just wanted to introduce you to him as somebody who has been just phenomenal with regard to his lived experience. And these are some of the things that he has recommended through this. Pay attention to transitions. This is when we know that our residents can be more vulnerable. Training programs must create a sense of belonging. As I said earlier, when people feel that they now have a new home for the next 3 or 4 years, that really speaks volumes. Meaningful connection with new people, the vulnerability of being sleep deprived, disinhibited from alcohol, we know all of that, and lean into the experience of being a patient. He's felt he's had to do this. And he said and any of you here in this room who has been a patient and it's gone well, if you've really felt that you were treated respectfully and got good medical care, it really does set us up very well to be better physicians ourselves. And be kinder and gentler with yourself, which he said that he's still working on. Abraham Verghese, when I read this, and he wrote this, I mean, he's such an amazing writer. But he actually published this piece before the pandemic. It was very, very early, I think in January of 2020. And I remember reading, and I pulled this out. So this is a tip of the hat about the importance of stories in our lives. And that's why you're going to meet some fascinating people, as you've just done already. So I started what I call the Physician Lived Experience Project back at that time. And I decided that I wanted to put a book together on this subject. And so I did a syllabus for that. And I pitched it with the American Psychiatric Association Publishing. And after a lot of backwards and forwards, they gave me a contract. And what this is, I'll explain in the next slide, is that I've reached out to individuals who I saw that they had talked about their stories and had published them. Not all had published, but they talked about them orally. And I reached out, so I had something to put into this prospectus. And so the book is called Physicians with Lived Experience, How Their Stories Offer Clinical Guidance. So it's not just an anthology of stories. I've done a critique of these, and I've picked out the pieces in which we can learn so much from these stories of our brothers and sisters in medicine. So it's coming out now. Just to tell you, it's an unusual book, and there are 2 forewords, but that was the editor-in-chief who suggested that. Dr. Darrell Kirch is an interesting man. He's a psychiatrist. He's been the dean of 2 different medical schools. He's an emeritus CEO of the American Academy of Medical Colleges. But he's also somebody who was closeted with anxiety and depression for decades and just told his story about 5 years ago and did it very, very public. He not only is a survivor of childhood abuse, sexual abuse, but also experienced a lot of trauma at a summer job before he went to medical school, where he was working on a field mission with some loggers, and a private plane crashed. And he and the fellow became first responders as they dealt with these badly injured, and some were dead, burned survivors of this plane crash. And he was traumatized by that. Went to medical school, got some very good care, but for decades has been this luminary who never ever shared his personal story with anyone but his wife and his children and his psychiatrist. So when he came out, so to speak, his colleagues who have known him for years, they just couldn't believe it, that he is such a highly accomplished individual. And he's an example of a wounded healer. I mean, where we can have something, get good care, and be very highly functioning. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. And Jennifer Feist is the sister of Dr. Lorna Breen, who the name is probably familiar to her because she's sort of become known across the world as the emergency physician who developed COVID very, very early in the first week of the pandemic when New York City, we were the epicenter in the United States. She got COVID very quickly, left work, got some care for it, but returned to work way too soon, crashed and burned, so to speak, fell into a very, very severe depression, received treatment, was discharged, and took her life within days of being discharged. In her family have set up the Dr. Lorna Breen Heroes Foundation. Jennifer's her sister, her brother-in-law Corey Feist, Jennifer's husband, and this foundation it's the work that they're doing on behalf of health professionals in the United States, if not the world, is phenomenal. What they've been doing is getting discriminatory questions removed from applications for medical licenses, because that's been a deterrent. People are afraid to go to see psychiatrists because they're going to have to put all of this out there when they apply for a medical license or credentialing at a hospital. And so they are working night and day to get rid of all of these questions. So like, for instance, in the state of New York, where I work, when I took out my New York medical license and applied, I was asked a lot of questions, but there were no questions about my health at all. And we are one of about a dozen states where there are no questions. Others have asked questions like, have you ever been treated for depression or alcoholism or all kinds of things? Those are the questions that are being purged from those applications. So that's the backstory there. This is Dr. Adam Hill. I've come to know all of these people because I reach out to them. But this is what he wrote in his article in the New England Journal of Medicine. I have a history of depression and suicidal ideation, and I'm a recovering alcoholic. So he was working in a state that when he moved from one state to another in the Midwest, they asked him to put his history out there for the public, what he calls public shaming. And he says, we're all responsible. Those physicians who serve on any of these committees, we have to be very aware of these types of things. So that was the article he wrote in the New England Journal of Medicine. And his book, Long Walk Out of the Woods, is just amazing. I did a big review of this on Amazon. It's such a moving, powerful book because he was so close to killing himself. And fortunately, his wife, who was just frantic, was able to reach him on his cell phone. He hardly had any battery left. He had gone to the woods. She managed to get the emergency people and saved his life, and now that's some time ago. He's just an amazing man. His story has resonated with so many people. And here's somebody who Gabrielle knows, Dr. Bashan, who I introduced him to at a meeting, APA meeting in San Francisco a few years ago. Now, I reached out to her because in my feed I saw that I don't normally subscribe to the Los Angeles Times, but what came up on my feed was this. This is on the front page. I am California's acting Surgeon General, and I have bipolar disorder. I mean, how many doctors do something like that? So I said, I have to meet this woman. I have to talk to this woman. I have to interview this woman. I tried to track her down. She had no idea who I was. She just thought I was some troll from the internet. But she was at least willing. I said, please look at my bio or something. So anyway, then we met, and now we've done work together and that sort of thing. So she's just amazing, the work that she is doing with the National Alliance on Mental Illness in the United States. And that's a quote from her. To spread the understanding that mental health conditions, especially, are treatable. Where this is so important is that when, and those of you who work in mood disorders will know this, that when it's a medical student who's been diagnosed with a mood disorder, especially if it's bipolar 1 or 2, it's hard to get your head around that because their exposure are the ones that they see on the streets, in our emergency rooms, on the inpatient units, some may be in outpatient units, but they're largely seeing individuals who have got, they're at the more serious end of the spectrum. They haven't seen high-functioning people who are living with bipolar illness. And so this is why people like Dr. Bashan, and there are others out there, I have a dear friend who's a psychiatrist who lives with bipolar illness, and John is his name, I interviewed him. He's in my book. He has started an international support group for doctors with mood disorders, a virtual support group. They come from all over the world, especially countries in which doctors living with any type of psychiatric illness are very, very closeted on that. It's become a very important public health boost, actually. So hats off to Dr. Bashan. And then young Christopher Veal, I met him when he wrote his piece, You're Not Alone in Your Darkest Hours. I reached out to him because of the fact that he had become very, very suicidal during the pandemic. And he fortunately thought, I'm going to call these people I knew, because they had lost their son to suicide. He knew about them. He didn't know them that well. They said, look, you're coming and staying with us. He took a leave from medical school, across the country. They took him in as a surrogate son, made sure that he got off to a psychiatrist, got care, and a good psychologist as well. And he has been speaking out a lot about he doesn't want students to not reach their full potential. And he's now finished his residency in internal medicine. And those are a list of the things that he has published. The third one is on YouTube. And what this is, at his medical school, because Black students are such a minority, that they show this at orientation for incoming medical students so they can hear his story of what it's been like for him, especially the microaggressions that he has suffered as a Black man. And this goes back several generations. One of a great uncle of his was killed by the Ku Klux Klan in the southern parts of the United States. He knows what it's like to be somebody who has suffered, historically, a lot of aggression. And then Justin Bullock, and he's actually a mentor to Dr. Bashan. It was when she read about Dr. Bullock that she decided, she spoke to her family and said, I'm going to go public with my bipolar illness because they spoke over the phone. They didn't know each other previously. And I came to know him when I read his piece in the New England Journal of Medicine, because he wrote there that he had just been hospitalized, I think for about the third or fourth time in medical school and then in residency, and this was the first time that he had not attempted suicide in this depression, and he felt good about that this was a step forward in his acceptance of his recurrent unipolar and then changed to bipolar depression. He's become very much of an advocate throughout the country. He's done so much volunteer work with various groups. And now he's a nephrologist in Seattle. So these are stories that are making us better human beings. And I just made a list of how are they making us better human beings? Okay, this is where I want to look at this. Look how they chip away at stigma, all right? And they do. They're just kind of normalizing this stuff. They get rid of the shame. They use the V word, the human vulnerability, and that is not a weakness, that it can actually be a strength. They talk about gratitude. That's pretty mature, right? So many of these individuals would say, if I had a chance of being born without a mental illness, I'm not sure if I would take that, actually. fortitude, gallantry, noble-mindedness. They're very generous in the way they reach out. The hours and hours that these individuals, and there are many, many more, that they've spent with me on Zoom meetings has been really something. They practice self-compassion. And you know, self-compassion, when we take care of ourselves, we take care of our patients better. And they're role models of altruism and decency. I have so much respect. I want to finish up now. Stuart Slavin is a very important, he's a pediatrician who's worked in medical education for a long, long time. And this is something that you can just, you know, look at later and take away on these slides because it's detailed. But basically, you can see on the left there, these are the things that pose threats to our trainees, all right? And this is where we come in as clerkship directors of medical students, program directors of residents, fellowship directors, of the things that we can do to intervene and affect ill mental health and promote better mental health. All of the stuff over on the right. So I won't spend a lot of time on that. This is more for your reading. But it's a lot of practical tips here. I mentioned that these are the 7 tips that if you're looking after somebody, a medical student, a resident, or a physician who comes your way, listen. Listening is so important. I can't tell you how many doctors I've looked after who have gone from a previous treating psychiatrist. So I said, well, tell me, why did you leave Dr. So-and-so and come to me or something? They said, it's very simple. I didn't know anything about you, but I got to tell you, the problem I had with Dr. So-and-so is that he just never listened. He just seemed to it was cursory. You know, he was trying to kind of fit me into DSM somewhere, but I never really got a chance to talk about myself. I was given a diagnosis, I was given treatment, but it was very, very impersonal. I got better, sort of, but I functioned better, but my soul wasn't better. Collaborate. It's a collaborative process. Embrace lifelong learning because, you know, you're looking after people who are your patients. They're doctor patients. They're involved with lifelong learning. We have to as well. Convey diagnosis with empathy. That's very, very important. I'm going to just switch back just for a moment. When and if we have to now talk with somebody who we've been treating for unipolar depression, but because of the course of this, we realized that this is bipolar 2. The correct diagnosis that will now require a mood stabilizer, the person's probably going to get better and feel better about that, but they're not too happy. And some will say things like, look, it was hard enough to get my head around unipolar, now it's bipolar. It kind of scares me, actually. I thought before, if I got depressed, then, you know, I would see it, then I could take time off work. I wouldn't, you know, I'd be careful with not see patients or something. With bipolar stuff, that scares me. I mean, I could go crazy. You know, I might harm someone, or I might do some stupid sort of hypersexual things, or spend too much money. So as you can see, they're talking all of the stuff of hypomania and mania. These are individuals who really need our continued psychoeducation and care. They need to see that right now, this is pretty scary, but we're going to get you through this, and you can live with this with, you know, proper care and stuff like that. And this is where then you can say, in fact, I'd like to introduce you to somebody who is 12 years your senior, and she is somebody who was where you were today, that kind of thing, so that they can see that I can have a life in medicine with this label, with this diagnosis. It's very, very important because of the fact that these individuals, if they feel that bipolar illness and medicine aren't compatible, then they could be at risk of harming themselves. Fight the myth that doctors are difficult patients. Have I had difficult doctor patients? Of course, but I've had all kinds of difficult patients, period. We don't have that. Don't hesitate to suggest a second opinion. That's another thing. I've seen doctor patients leave a particular psychiatrist because they said, look, I brought up a second opinion because I wasn't getting better, but that really made her defensive. And she just got angry at me. She blamed me. She said I wasn't trying hard enough. And I thought maybe she was right. So I tried harder. I did this, I did that, or whatever, but I still wasn't doing well. So that I just left. I just went and I got a second opinion on my own. And remember to thank medical students and physicians who share their lived experience narratives. I need to share something with you. I've interviewed so many of these doctors, and they've said the outpouring of emails that they've received from strangers from all over the world, thank you for writing your article. You've actually helped me a lot. You've saved my life. And they said from all branches. So I asked, and I said, have you been receiving emails and unsolicited things, many from psychiatrists? They said occasionally. And I was surprised at that. I thought, because these illnesses are in our branch of medicine, why wouldn't we be reaching out more if we read an article in the journal about it? Why wouldn't we say, hey, I read your article, thank you for writing this. I'm a psychiatrist. I've been working in a stigmatized branch of medicine for 50 years. You're chipping away at stigma by doing this. Thank you. I think we need to do more of that. Your own wellness, strive for balance, easy stuff, okay? Pay attention to all this stuff. What about feedback from our families, okay? When they say, hey, you're working too hard. Are you sure you need another drink? Going to make us defensive, right, and angry? When we calm down, maybe they've got a point. If they love us and care about us, those are concerns they've had. So try to leave your defensiveness at the door. It's okay to get initially defensive, sleep on it, and the next day say, I think we need to talk about last night. I was really, really upset when you were commenting about my drinking, but I wonder if you've got a point there. Talk to others, don't isolate. Put yourself first. Don't blame yourself. About burnout, it is systemic. We heard that, of course, in the first presentation. How medicine is structured today. Rest and sleep, very important. All this stuff about exercise, I know that you know all of these things. By the way, getting a primary care physician, I hope that all of you in this room have one, because when we don't have one, we're tempted to self-medicate and to self-diagnose. If you got a primary care physician, a GP or family physician, you go to that person and say, you know what, I'm not sleeping well, or I'm not concentrating, or I've lost 15 pounds. I wonder, I don't know, I thought it was maybe my thyroid or anemia. They'll check all of that out, but it could be depression. Collegial relationships, these doctor peer groups, very important. The Ballant groups, those are started in England. Mindfulness meditation, a lot of good evidence there about its effectiveness, CBT, etc. I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you so much, Dr. Elvia, for inviting me, and your whole team for inviting me and having me here. My colleagues and mentors and patients, I learned so much from them. I couldn't do the work that I do without them. They inspire me. And they're just so generous, and they educate all of us. I realize I'm from another country. That's the phone number, but that's my email, and that's my that's my website. I try to keep a lot of stuff there of things and blog pieces and interviews and stuff like that that might be helpful. Thank you for coming today, and thank you for having me.
Bueno, atendiendo a la disposición del programa, vamos a tomar un receso hasta las 11 para dar continuidad con la conferencia del doctor Gómez, y tendremos una sesión de preguntas de 11:45 a 12 con los doctores Myers y Gómez. Entonces, los esperamos puntualmente. Muchas gracias.